basically means that, like, let's say we declare a variable and we assign it number 10, right? So we say x equals 10. And then, like, let's say we use it in a method, right? And we use that x and we change it, right? And then further on the program, we don't, like, we don't use that code, right? Like, we don't use it anywhere in our program. So Java will automatically just throw that away because it's not being used and they don't want to waste space in the memory. So that's why, hence it's called the automatic garbage collector. It'll just throw away, like, it'll throw away stuff that's not being used because, in order to save memory and space. Any questions on that so far? I'm looking at the chat. No questions? All right, let's continue. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about creating a Java project, right? Okay, so in this slide you can see the structure of a Java project, right? So on the right hand side, I just showed like quick steps on how to create a Java project. So when you create a Java project, it depends on like what kind of project you're working on. You're gonna give it a name, and then you're gonna create a package under your source folder, right? You could have multiple packages. Um, it's up to you, but it depends what kind of project you're working on. So, and then like inside your package, you could have class, right? You could have multiple classes as well. So here's just like a picture showing you guys like, the structure of a Java project. So there's Java project, there's packages, and then there's classes inside, right? What you see inside these packages, I have two classes, right? I have class A and class B. As you guys, on the bottom right, you can see the key, right? The star is basically the main method. As I said previously, a Java project or application needs to run from the main method. So you need to have at least one main method in your Java project. So I have that main method declared in class A. And the ovals are basically variables, methods, and constructors. So I hope this gives you an understanding of how a Java project is structured. And now we're going to go in details about variables, methods, and constructors right now. It seems like mother folder and child or children folders relationship Java package class objects. Could make it. I'm not entirely sure if it's like the relationship is like that. But you could have other stuff outside of, like, you could have a Java project and you could have like like when you create a Java project, you see that has libraries and stuff. So it's just not packages. But just for our sake, for beginner's sake, this is like the common things that we need to know. There's more to this though, but this is like what you'll see in almost every Java project though. But yeah, so like it's a Java project. Inside that Java project, you'll have packages, and inside the package, you have classes. And inside those classes, you have objects, variables, methods, whatnot. Okay. Okay, so now we're talking about the structure of a Java class. So basically, the class right here, right? The structure of a let's say a class, right? So the structure of a Java class follows like this. I use these colors for you guys to like understand. So like you'll see an example, but access specifier, right? If that's the first thing you want, right? It could be like public, private, protected, and then it's gonna follow a class, right? And then it's gonna say so public And then like if your access specifier was public, right? So you're gonna say public class and then the name of your class. And remember uh, the convention of naming your class, right? It's always capital. The first letter is always capital. So that's the start of a class body, right? And what I was talking about yesterday when we creating our own class, you know how I kept saying, you know, variables are at the top, then you usually have the constructors after that, and then you usually have the methods, you know, declared or implemented. So this is the structure of a Java class. You're gonna have your variables declared here. You're gonna have your constructors declared, right? And then you're gonna have your methods declared and implemented, and that's it. That's the end of class body. So what this basically is, you know, that's basically a Java class, right? So on the next slide, you'll see an example. So here's an example of a Java class. Just hold on, just give me a second. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so here's an example of a Java class. I use the colors right here, you know, just so like you can correspond it to. So like, you know, the access specifier is red, so you know what that like public is corresponding to that. So it'll be easier for you guys to like, you know, go back to the slides and understand. Okay, so we have our access specifier, right? So for this class, it was public, right? Public class employee. Employee is our class name, right? It's the name of the class. That's employee. And now we need to declare our variables, right? So we declared two variables. We declared it a string, a name, and an int age, right? So now we want to create our constructors. I created two constructors here. One constructor is a default, and another one is a constructor that takes in a string parameter and followed by an integer, uh, right? We'll talk about constructors soon, but right now I just want to show you the structure of a class. And then we have, you know, we could declare or implement our methods. So right here, like this is a get name, you know, that's a method. So we have it, declared there. So any questions on the structure of a Java class? If not, I'll move on. Okay, so let me just open yesterday's work, right? So yesterday we worked on a cars project. So I'm just gonna open this, and we're gonna look at the cars class, right? So let's just compare and contrast it with the structure of a Java class right here, right? So we have the access specifier class followed by a name of class. And then, so right here you can see public class cars, right? And then we declare the variables, then it's followed by constructors, and then we declare implement methods, right? So right here, we declared a default constructor, and then we created like 4 more constructors, 5. We created like another 5 more constructors, right? And then we followed it by get and set methods, right? So that's basically a basic structure of a class right here. Okay, so now we're moving into variables. So what are variables in Java? There are 2 types of variables in Java, right? We have primitive and reference. We have primitive types and reference types. Primitive types consist of Boolean, byte, short, character, integer, long, float, and double. Reference types are string, arrays, and objects. Examples of primitive variables. So here are examples of, you know, like for example, a Boolean, right? So if you want to well, you want to declare and initialize a Boolean variable. That's an example. So is present, that's the name, right? It's set to true. Here we have byte equals 10, and there's like plenty of examples right here. These are just examples of primitive variables. And right here we have examples of reference variables. So like string, organization is people in tech, array, integer array num equals new integers with the size of 10. Don't worry about array for right now. You guys will deal with it in a couple of weeks. And then we have object, right? This is we're creating an object of employee one, right? So these are examples of reference variables. Okay, so now how do we declare variables, right? So we usually declare it by, we have the variable type, and then it's followed by the variable name. So here's an example, right? We have int, which is the variable type, and then it's the name of this variable is called number. Here we have a string, that's the variable type, and we called it name. Boolean is absent double income, right? So this is basically we're declaring variables. We're not giving values yet. When we give it values, we call it it's called initializing variables, right? So here you go. When you initialize variables, that means you're giving it a value. So it's going to be follow the variable type, which is followed by the variable name, equals, and then whatever value you assign it to, right? So here we say int number equals 30, right? String name equals John Doe. Remember, it depends on what variable type you use. So if I were to use string right here, right, I have to use the double quotations because it's a string type. Remember what we said earlier, the five keynotes, important stuff of Java. Java is strongly typed language right here. So it really matters of what, you can see the example right here I just showed, right? So it matters that you use the double quotations for string. It matters that you only use true or false for your values for Boolean. It matters that you use like a decimal point for double or float, right? So, Java is a strongly typed language. Okay, so right now we're going to talk about the structure of a Java method. Here you can see I use these colors again, right? So it starts with an access specifier. Access specifier is either public, private, protected, right? And then it's followed by a method type. These method types usually are the same types that you would like it to return as well. And then it's followed by a method name, which is the name of your method, right? And then it's followed by the parameter, right? What's inside your parameter. And then you're gonna start it with an open bracket, and you're gonna close your method with a closing bracket. But inside that bracket, you're gonna have the method body, right? So here we have the return types, right? So return types, you could return primitive and reference types that we discussed earlier. And the non-return type is void, that returns nothing. So here's an example of a method called add. So we have public int add, right? Once again, these colors correspond to like what they're following. So you see here we have two parameters. We have integer a and integer b. So in our method body, we say int result equals a plus b, and it will return the result. So here we see that our method and return type is integer. So when we return the result, it has to be an integer. If it was double right here, if I said double result equals a and b, and I return the result, it'll give me an error because I set the method return type right here as an integer, right? So if I were to say double result here, I would have to change this to double as well. So you got to be consistent. Right here, this is a method that just prints hello. So we don't need a return type, right? This is just printing to the console. So that's hence we use void. So we're not returning anything. And our method name is say hello, and this just prints out hello. Can you give example of double data type? Double, like, just like right here. So like, just ignore this. Actually, I'll just create it here. So ignore everything here. I'm just creating a method right here, just to show you an example of a double method. So double, let's say, divide, right? Divide number, right? So if I have two numbers, right, I'd want double num1 and double num2. And here I would, double result equals num1 divided by num2, and then I return result. So that would give me a double result. Okay, sure. I can explain the return result again. So here, like, this is our Java structure of a Java method. So in the method type, return type, that's what type of what data type are you trying to return, right? So here we're adding, right? So we're adding two integers. So we want to return an integer, right? So we're gonna say public int add, right? So we're gonna say the integer result equals a plus b, and then we're gonna return the result, right? But let's say if we were to, if we were to, like, let's say we label it public int add, right? But inside our method body, we say double instead of integer, and we say double result equals a and b. We're gonna get an error, right? Because first of all, the parameters, they're integers, right? Integer a and integer b, and then second of all, you declared that your return method and return type is integer right here. So if you were to return result, you're returning a double data type, so it has to be an integer. Does that clear it up? We'll show examples of this or later. Okay, so actually before I move on, let's just do like examples of each, right? So we talked about Java class. So everyone open Eclipse and create a new project. So I'm gonna create a new project. All right, I'm gonna just call it. Can you guys hear music in the background? My neighbors are playing it. It's kind of annoying. Okay, it's not as loud. Thank goodness. All right, so I'm just gonna create a project and I'm gonna name it. So we made a project called Cars yesterday. Let's think of something else. Let's call this hospital, right? You know, and to finish, I'm gonna open up the thing inside source folder. I'm gonna create a package, right? And I'm gonna call it main. So inside main, I'm gonna have two classes. I'm gonna have my main class that's gonna, have the consist of the main method. So I'm gonna call that main class, the application class. I'm gonna check on this because it's gonna contain my main method. And I'm also going to create a hospital class. Make sure it's capital. Okay, I can just delete this to leave it alone. Okay, so inside we just created a hospital class, right? Is everyone caught up with me? Make sure you guys are doing this in your clips as well. Just let me know in the chat if you guys are up, if you guys are caught up. It's better. It's best if we all do this together. Is everyone up to this point? All right. So let's go back to our PowerPoint, right? And right here, it says the structure of a Java class, right? So we created a hospital class. So far, we have the active specifier ready, and we have the name of the class ready, right? So we basically created this right here, right? But we're missing these stuff right here, right? So we want to declare our variables, but for the sake, like for the let's just create two variables, right? So I want you guys to create a variable called patient name, and just the patient name and patient ID. That's it. Create those two variables. When you're done, let me know. Patient name and patient ID. So create patient name and patient ID. Declare. Let me know. Let me know when you guys have done that. It should take no less than one. Should take you under 1 minute. Where it's just it's just two variables. So the structure of a Java class, right? We did this part already, right? Which is very simple. We just create a class called hospital, right? And right now we're working on declaring the variables. So I told you guys to declare patient name and patient ID variables. So how would you guys write that down? If you guys are finished, write it in the chat. Anyone? It should take like 30 seconds. Okay, so a non-finished one, but I I hope you capitalize the string, the S, because remember Java is sensitive. All right, so let's declare our patient name and patient ID, right? So what you want to do is string, right? and we're gonna do patient name, right? And we're gonna end it with a semicolon. And now we're gonna declare an ID. So we're gonna use int. We're gonna say patient ID like that. Is this what everyone got, or something close? Any questions about this? Remember, I want this to be interactive. I don't want you guys to just watch. Just do it. Also do it yourself. If you guys don't do this right now, it's gonna get harder next week and next week, and you guys will fall behind a lot. Trust me, I came from the last batch. I seen people struggle with this because they didn't take the first week or two seriously, and the first 2 weeks are important because that's what the basic Java is. If you don't understand the basic Java, then you can't even like do the intermediate advanced stuff. So you have to know these basic stuff like declaring variables, initializing, like those simple stuff. So I want you guys to try this out yourselves as well. Okay, so we declared 2 variables right here, right? So according to our the diagram of create the structure of a Java class. So far, we have the access specifier class, name of class, right? And we have the variables declared, right? So now we want to create our constructors, right? So now let's create our constructor. Um, if you guys were here yesterday, how do you create your default constructor? So default constructor. How would you guys do it? Okay, so I'll teach you guys about constructors right now. So let me go to that slide right now. Okay, so this is a structure of a constructor. So it's gonna start with an access specifier, right? It's gonna you're gonna have the name of the class that you know. So if it's hospital, your constructor name is gonna be hospital. If your class name is cars, your constructor name is gonna be cars. It's gonna be spelled the exact way you spelled class. If your class name is gonna be student, right? The constructor's name of the class is gonna be student, right? So you're gonna have the access specifier followed by the name of class, and then you're gonna have the parameter, right? So in a default constructor, you take in no parameters, so you're gonna leave the parameter empty. But so right here, the purpose of a constructor is to initialize the object, right? A constructor with no parameters is called a default constructor, and you can have multiple constructors in your class. So if you were to create another constructor, right, besides the default constructor, we would add parameters inside this. So here's an example, right? Let's like from our employee class, right? So we have a class called employee. This would be our default constructor right here. Public employee, um, just close bracket. It's legit this thing right here. That's a default constructor, right? Another constructor, right, for your employee class, it takes in 2 parameters, which is a string, and then it's followed by an integer, right? And then you set the method body of that. You define it inside that constructor. Okay, so any questions on the structure of a constructor? Okay, so I showed you guys the structure of a constructor. So now how would you guys create a default constructor for a hospital? So just follow this thing right here. So how would you create a default constructor for a hospital right here? Okay, so let's follow this guide, right? So, okay. So a default constructor is a constructor with no parameters, right? That's what a default constructor is. So our access specifier, we're gonna use public, right? Then the name of the class. What's the name of our class right here? It's hospital, right? So we're gonna say hospital, and the parameter. What's gonna be inside the parameter? But since we're dealing with the default constructor, there are no parameters, so we're just gonna leave it like that, right? And now we're just gonna start and close it. There you go. Could press enter after this and leave it like that. It doesn't matter. So there you go. We just created our default constructor for hospital class right here. Okay, so now let's create another constructor that takes in just the patient name. So how would you guys write that constructor? A constructor that just takes in the patient's name. Nope. Yeah, remember, you have to follow this right here. Remember, constructors, they always have the name of the class, right? All right, so let's try it, right? Okay, so now we're trying to create a constructor, right, that takes in strings patient name. So that's just one parameter, right? So what's the access specifier? That's going to be public, right? What's the name of the class? Our class is hospitals, so we're going to say hospital, right? Make sure it's spelled the exact way. And now we're going to take in the parameter, right? So we said it's a constructor that takes in a string's patient name. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say string patient name right here, right? And now we're going to open it and close it, right? So now we created a constructor that takes in the string's patient name. We will fill this out later, but let's just worry about declaring the constructors. Okay, so now what about a constructor that takes in both of these parameters? How would you guys do it? If we don't have these constructors, we're not going to be able to create objects, and that's the main important part of Java, objects and classes. So we need to create these constructors. They're very important. Yeah. So Anand got it right. So this is how we're gonna create a constructor that takes in both these parameters. So once again, we look at the access specifier. It's public. And the name of the class is hospital, and we're gonna take in two variables, right? So we're gonna say string patient name and the patient ID. So int patient ID, right? We're gonna close it. We're gonna open and close it. There you go. Any questions on this so far? Okay, so let's go back to our previous constructor and let's define the constructor right now, right? So the constructor body, that's what we're gonna do right now. So this takes in one parameter. So when you create an object of this, right? Whatever parameter you're gonna put there, that's what the patient name is gonna turn equal to, right? So our variable right here is called patient name, right? So we're gonna do patient name, right? And we want it to equal to the value that is passed on this parameter, right? So we're gonna say patient name, right? But now you see the problem, right? If you hover over it, it says the assignment to variable patient name has no effect, right? So you're literally saying patient name equals patient name. So you want Eclipse to know which patient name you're talking about, right? So you want this patient name, right? Which is part of the class, right? Remember, um, Java is all about classes and objects. So the variables that you declared here are part of your class. So you want to um, give this variable right here the value of whatever is passed in the parameter, right? So if I want to, you know, uh, uh, like talk about this one, right? If I want to refer to this class variable, what you'd want to do is you would add a keyword this, and you follow by a dot. So now the error is gone. So that's how it works. So you would use the this keyword. Okay, so how would I do it for these two parameters? So I'm gonna write it down in the comments. All right. We're not going to say this hospital. Hospital is the class name. So yeah, we're gonna say this patient. So yeah, so Zaman Anan, you got it correct. So we're gonna say this dot name equals the patient name equals patient name right here, right? And we're gonna say this dot patient ID equals patient ID. Oh, spelled it wrong. There you go. Okay, so we just created three constructors here, right? So we created a default constructor, we created a constructor that takes in a string parameter, and we created a constructor that takes in a string and an integer, right? You could leave your default constructor like this, or you could also define your default constructor, right? You could leave it blank or you could define it. Let's say we want to define our default constructor, right? But let's say we only want to define like the patient ID. So what we're gonna do here, how would we let's say we want the patient ID to be the default value to be 0, right? So whenever you create a hospital object, that patient's ID is gonna be 0. So when you're doing a default constructor. So how are we gonna what are we gonna put inside here? Remember, so I want to say the patient ID equals 0 for the default constructor. How would I do it? It's pretty simple, straightforward. Anyone? Okay. So Moses, he said 1, 2, 3, 4. That can work as well. So you can give it any number you want, right? But I'm just gonna say 0, right? Anand, right? You can't say patient ID equals. You can't give it a name. Do you know why? Yep. So patient ID is not a string. Remember, Java is strongly typed. So whatever type you use, that's what you're gonna have to. You have to be consistent with it. So you can't give it a string value to an integer type. So patient ID has to be integers. So we're just gonna say 0 like this, right? And do you guys want to give it a default name? Let's give it a default name. So we're just gonna say patient name equals, we're gonna say max, right? Okay. Um, can we define variables in public static void string? Yeah, you can define variables right here, but the thing what you're doing is every time you run the program is gonna initialize and declare those variables. So it's not like it's not good for memory and stuff. Like I'm not sure how to answer it, but yeah, you could declare variables in public static void. Like here, there you go. Remember, whatever is inside the main method, that's what's gonna execute, right? What we're doing here, if we were to run our program right now and we have nothing inside our main method, it's not gonna do anything because there's nothing inside the main method. We can't use these stuff right here. That's why constructors, that's why class is very important. Inside the class, you're gonna have constructors, and with these constructors, you would be able to call it inside your main method, and that's how you would be able to uh, use the hospital object here. But first, let's just finish our hospital class, right? Okay, so we created three constructors, right? So as you can see, let's go back. So the structure of a Java class, right? So we have the name of the class, right? It's called public class hospital. We already declared the variables, right? We said patient ID and patient name, right? And we already created our constructors, right? So far that's what we did. That's what we've done so far, right? Okay, so let's say um let me just. Some people get like confused by the comments, so I'm just gonna leave it. Okay, so let's say I just accidentally removed this, right? There's a shortcut of generating these constructors. You could basically just select both of these variables, right click, source, and generate constructor using fields. And then you select these two variables. You could do one variable, two variables, and then you put the insertion point. I want it to be after this constructor, right? I press OK, and there, it generated a constructor for me without me having to write anything, right? You could remove the super. You don't need it. Okay, so now we're done with our constructor. Now let's create our methods, right? Some basic methods of a class are called getters and setters, right? Those are just basic methods of almost any classes, right? Those getters and setters allows you to get the values of those variables or like of your object, right? Or you could also set the object to whatever value you want. So in order to generate getters and setters, you could do it manually, right? But it would if you had like 12 variables right here, it would take forever to write everything down, right? But since we only have two, right, it won't take that much time. But let's just show you the shortcut anyway. So the shortcut is the same as doing the shortcut for the constructor, right? So just highlight it, right click, go to source, and then you'd say generate getters and setters. You would want to select all the variables that you want to select the getter and setter methods for, and then it'll tell you where do you want to insert your methods, right? So once again, look at our structure of our Java class. We want to have those methods after the constructor, right? So we're just gonna say after this constructor of hospital string integer, right? And we're gonna have it public, and now we're gonna press OK. And there you go. We just generated getters and setters, right? So getters and setters, that's two methods for one. It generates two methods for one variable. So total we have four methods, right? But we have two variables. So right here we just created a class. So here we have the structure of a Java class, right? So for us, it's gonna be public, right? And then name was okay. So it was public class hospital, right? For us, and we declared the variables and we declared the constructors, and we generated getters and setters. So we just create. Here's a example of a Java class right here that we just did. Also, remember to remove any white space if you can. Yes, I can show getters and setters again. So once again, getters and setters, right? Basically these right here. Um, these are methods that allow you that like when you create an object in the main class or something, these are methods that get, like for right here, like string get patient name, it will return the patient's name, right? So that's what the get method does, right? The set method does is it will set that patient's name to whatever you put as a parameter, right? So that's what basically getters and setters are. So let's say we don't have it right now and we want to generate it, right? So what you do is simply just highlight your variables, right? That you declared on the top. You're gonna right click, you're gonna go to source, and then you're gonna say generate getters and setters over here. Remember, so what we did so far is we could use shortcuts to generate constructor using fields, which is right here, and getters and setters, which is right here. So when we click on this, it's gonna say select the getters and setters to create. So we want to select all because those are the variables that we're gonna create the getters and setters for. And then we're gonna insert the insertion point, and we're gonna do it after hospital constructor, right? The final hospital constructor, and then we're gonna press OK. And you see it just created the getters and setters after this method. It created under here. So here we have a hospital class. Any questions? Does anyone like any doubts or anything? We just created a Java class so far. All right. Now, hold on. Before I move, I just want to know how many people are doing this along with me. Like they have Eclipse open as well, and they're doing this as well. Okay. All right. All right, that's good. I have some errors showing. Do you want me to look at your screen right now and help you out? That's what I want you guys to do this for. All right, so I'm gonna make you presenter. All right, we'll look at both your screens. So let me look at me first. Make presenter. This is how we're gonna learn. This is how we learn. We look at other people's stuff and look at errors, right? Okay. So we have some errors right here, right? So let's scroll all the way top. Okay. So what you created a class called hospital, right? That's correct. And then you declared two variables, right? You declared the patient name and patient ID. That's correct, right? But the thing is that in your constructor you have an error, right? On that, right? So if you just hover over it, it would say that that variable doesn't exist. Hover over that. So it says that pen ID cannot be resolved to variable. It's because you declared integer, right? In you declare with a capital P at the top, and you spelled it wrong as well. So it's lowercase p and then also add the T at the end, like before ID. Right, there you go. So now what you want to do is change that to, there you go. So that problem is fixed now, right? So now let's look at the second constructor, right? So this one takes in patient name. You spelled the patient name parameter wrong, but so it doesn't matter, but it's good to stay consistent. So the parameter, the string patient name, you're forgetting a T. Yeah. And so you said this dot patient name equals patient name. Yeah, so you spelled it wrong there as well. So P-A-T-I, yeah. There you go. So that's fixed. And just fix the naming of the method or in the return type. Yeah, so just lowercase that. Okay, so do you understand like why you got errors now? It's because you declared the variables in one way, but you're writing it in a different way. So you have to be sure your spelling is correct. So you still have an error in line 44 where you said patient ID equals patient ID, but it's missing a T. So yeah, there you go. But right now, but you have an error right there. You're forgetting the this keyword. So just put this. See the yellow line? You said patient ID equals patient ID. So Eclipse wants to know which patient ID you're trying to refer to. So you're referring, the first patient ID is referring to the variable name that you declared in the top. Yep, and that's it. There you go. All right. Who else is next? Oh, if just press save and the X should go away. By the way, you see how the X is still on your left side of the screen on your package explorer. So if you just save it, if you just save right now, it should go away. See, now the error is gone. All right. Who's next? Muhammad Ali. All right. Making presenter. Okay. So let's scroll all the way top. Okay. So this is your public class. You declared the things. All right. You have an error, and okay, hover over it and see what it says. Yeah, just hover over it. Just click on the red line and just hover over it. Yeah. So it says duplicate method hospital, string int and type hospital. So the thing is that you already have a constructor that takes in string and integer already. So if you scroll down, you'll see you have two identical constructors. So remember when I don't know if you were here yesterday, but I said that you cannot create constructors if they have if they take in the same types of parameters in the same order. So that constructor in the top right, it says you take a string followed by an integer, right? And then in the bottom is the same thing as well. You take in a string followed by an integer. So what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to delete one of those. Wait, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. Undo, undo. Okay, so you see how you just tried to delete a method, right? You want to delete the whole method body, right? You just deleted the first line. So yeah, make sure you get the end bracket as well. Remember, each method they're opened with, yeah, there you go. And now you just delete. There you go, your error is gone. Just save it. There you go. Anyone else? Anyone else have any problems? No problem. All right. Okay. So we all created a class, right? So I'm just gonna repeat it once more. So the structure of a Java class, right? Uh, Top has the variables declared, then followed by constructors, and then it's the methods, right? The getters and setters. Now the problem is like, you done like 70% of a Java project, right? A basic Java project, right? So now you want to go to your main class and you want to like, create an object. How do you create an object? I'm show you guys that right now. Okay, so this is how you create an object, right? So in order to create an object, it requires a class. A class provides the blueprint for objects, right? You create an object from a class, right? So if you look right here, you know, um, so in order to create an object, it requires a class, right? So if you were to create an hospital object, we're gonna need to create a hospital class, right? So we just created a hospital class here, and once again, they said that a class provides the blueprint for objects, right? So a class provides it provides blueprints for objects, right? So here, this is our blueprint, right? We have the variable names, and we have the constructors for it, and we have the methods, right? So that's basically our blueprint. So when we create a hospital object, right? Uh, uh, you know, it will contain these. Um, it will contain these. What you call it? I'm looking for the word here. It'll contain these like it'll have access to these methods and variables. So right now, let's go inside our main method, right? And okay, first let's look at here. So um, right here is an example of creating an object. So here we created an object, right? We have a class called employee from right here. So we're using this class, right? So it has a string name, integer age, right? It has a default constructor, and it has a constructor that takes in 2 parameters, and it has a method that has returns the name, right? So we're gonna create an object of that class employee, right? So how are they gonna do it? You say employee, right? And then you give the name of your object. So we're gonna say employee1 equals new employee. So this calls an object of the default constructor, right? And this constructor it uses the one that takes in 2 parameters, right? And we create an object and it's called employee2. So here the declaration, right? The code set in red and green are all variable declarations that associate a variable name with an object type. So employee1, right? So employee1 is the variable name and its object type is employee, right? Employee is a class name. So remember, Java is all about classes and objects, right? So here employee2, that's our variable name, right? But it associates with employee object type, right? It's an employee type object, right? So this is almost similar. Like if you were to say int x, right? X would be the variable name, but it would be integer type. This is what basically this is. So employee1, right? That's the variable name, and it's an employee type. And That's what declaration is, right? And now this is instantiation, right? So the new keyword is a Java operator that creates the object, right? So when you say new, it creates an object, right, inside the heap, I think, in the heap memory, right? It creates an object, right? But the initialization, right? The new operator is followed by a call to the constructor, right? Which initializes the new object. So when you say new, you're creating a new object, right? But now you want to initialize the object. So that's what the purpose of the constructor is, right? That's why constructors are so important. So if you're creating a new object of employee type right here, and it's called employee one, what you're using the default constructor, right? So when you uh, so this object will have the properties of a default constructor, right? Employee two, you're using the constructor that takes in two properties. So this object will have the property, it'll have the name Kenny, right? And it'll have the age of 23. Do you guys understand that? Any questions? Remember, this PowerPoint I uploaded to Dropbox so you guys can go back and look at it again. And I made it color friendly so you guys can compare and contrast. And I have the websites that you can visit that show more in depth, are more in depth about it if you want to look more about it. Okay, so here we just learned how to create an object, right? So let's do that right now. Okay, let's go over it one more time. All right. Okay, so you know how we created our class, right? Once again, our class consisted of variables, constructors, and methods, right? Let's look at it. Let's look at the employee class, right? For example, so here we have an example of an employee class, right? It has string name and integer age as the variables declared, and then it has two constructors, right? One constructor is the default constructor, and another constructor takes in two parameters, right? So now we want to create an object, right, in the main class, right? So in order to create an object, it requires a class. So if I want to create a hospital object, right, I need to have a class called hospital that's defined, right? So we defined our hospital class here already, right? It's defined right here, right? So a class provides the blueprints for objects, right? You create an object from a class. So you must need a class in order to create an object. That's why when I created this project, I went straight to the class and I defined it first, right? You need to have a class first in order to create an object, right? So that's what we just did. Okay, so here is an example of creating an object. So the first line right here, right? Um, we say employee, right? Employee one equals new employee, right? So the codes set in red and green are all variable declarations that associate a variable name with an object type. So the green is our variable name and the red is our object type, right? So if you look at here, if you look at our employee class, right, is called employee with a capital E, right? But if we want to create an object of it, we're gonna need to say employee, right? So that's what the object type is employee. If we were to create a hospital object, right? We're gonna say hospital, right? Because that object type is hospital, because that object consists of hospital stuff inside the class, right? So the green is the variable name, so we just named an employee one, right? So we do the equal sign, right? We're initializing the object, right? And so right here, when we say new, right? And when you say new, that's basically instantiation, right? The new keyword is a Java operator that creates an object. So if you want to create an object, you need to use new, right? So after new, you're gonna follow with the constructor, right? That's what basically initialization is. The new operator is followed by a call to a constructor, which initializes the new object, right? So here in the first line, we use the default constructor from the employee class, which is right here. So right here, this is the default constructor of the employee class, right? And so employee one object will have the properties of the default constructor and stuff, right? And now we create this line, right? We say employee two equals new employee, right? And it takes in two parameters, and that's this constructor right here. So it takes in the string name and integer age, and it will assign the name and age to those values, right? That's what we did right here. So employee two, it has the value, it has employee two's object, right? It contains the name of Kenny, and the age will be set to 23. So that's what basically what you do when you create an object. Is it clear for you guys now? We're gonna do it for a hospital class now. All right. So now let's go back to our hospital class. Now we're gonna go to application inside our main method, right? You know, your Java program runs from the main method. So whatever is inside the main method, that's what's gonna execute. So we want to create an object, right? So how are we gonna let's create an object using the default constructor, right? And let's name it let's name it let's just name the variable, let's just say create a default create and name it okay, so do that right now. So how would you guys do this? Okay, so do you guys created a hospital object called John? Okay, instead of this, just declare a hospital object called John. That's it. It's almost the same as it's literally the same as declaring, like, other data types like integer x or string name or something. So declare a hospital object called John. How would you guys do it? Anyone from the chat? How do we declare a hospital object called John? Pretty straightforward. So if we're declaring variables, right? And this is how we declare variables, like int, number, string, name, boolean is absent, double, income. So it should be the same, right? So, but instead we're declaring an object, right? So we want to declare a hospital object, right? Named John. How will we do that? Just throw out ideas, like just say what you guys think, like what you guys like think the answer is. I just want to know if you guys are heading to the right track. So if I want to declare an object, if I want to declare a hospital object called John, how would I do it? It's pretty similar like this. Anyone? If you guys don't know, just let me know in the chat, because I want to know if like people are actually trying. All right, so the question is like, if I were to create a hospital object, right? If I were to create a hospital object named John, like, well, just declare a hospital object named John. Would you, do you guys know how to do it? Yeah, it is similar to how we did in the cars example from yesterday. Okay, so if you were to declare a hospital object called John, right? Simply is just hospital, right? That's our object type, and then we're gonna say John. There you go. That's it. We just declared a we just declared an object called John, right? Which is a hospital type. That's all we did right here. That was simple, right? But now we want to initialize it, right? We want to use the we want to create that. We want to create that object, right? So in order to create the object, you want to use new, right? So we're going to use new, and what constructor we're going to use? We're going to use the default constructor, right? So we're going to have to say hospital, and that's what we're going to do. There you go. So now we just have an object, a hospital object called John, right? So now if you were to write John and press dot, you can see that we have access to the stuff inside hospital class. So whatever stuff it says on the right, that means it belongs to the hospital class. So patient ID, patient name, get patient ID, we have get patient name, we have set patient ID, set patient name, right? Okay, so this was using a default constructor, right? So what about now? How would you create a hospital object called Sarah, right, with the ID of 120, with the name of Sarah, obviously, and the ID of 120? How would you guys do it? Yeah, we could use that. But like I want to use the constructor that takes in two parameters. So the one that where we set her name to Sarah, and also the ID as well. So yeah, so we're gonna say hospital, right? Sarah, equals new, right? It creates the new hospital Sarah object, right? Hospital, and then we're gonna say Sarah, right? That's her name, and then we're gonna give it the ID 123, right? There you go. Um, you know how we created the John object using the default one, but inside our inside our inside our default constructor, right? The patient name is Max, right? So what is the name for what value does the uh, John object hold as a name? What's it gonna be? This is what our default constructor is defined as. So what will John's patient ID and patient name be? Yep, it would be Max and 0, right? But his name is not Max, so we want to change that, right? So how would you guys change it? No, we can't use Max dot because there is no object called Max, right? There is no called we did not create an object called Max. We only have John and Sarah so far, but we want to change John's patient name, right? Because the default constructor, it says the patient name is Max, right? Because we use the default constructor to create the John object. So what we want to do is John, right? Dot, and then we could set the patient name, right? We go to set patient name, and we could just type in John, right? There you go. Yeah. And another way you could have, instead of doing it this way, right? You could have used the other constructor that just takes in the name, right? So let me just comment this out. Oops. So what another way you could have done this is hospital, right? John equals new hospital, and you'd want to use the constructor that takes in just the patient name, right? So this constructor right here, the second constructor, it takes in the patient name and it sets it to that. So we could just say John right here. And there you go. It creates a John object with the name John, right? So here's two ways to do it, right? One way is to use the default constructor and then set the patient name to John, or another way is to use the constructor that takes in a string, right? That's why creating constructors are very important, right? You don't want to just create a default constructor, right? If I were to take out these constructors, and let's say I want to if I were to take out these constructors, right? Right here, and I just have the default constructor, and let's say I want to create a hospital object, right? Named let's say Mark, right? And I want to give him the ID like 190, right? Um, and I only have this default constructor. It would take me time, right? I would have to say hospital Mark equals new hospital, right? And that'll be the default constructor. And then I'd have to manually change the patient ID, right, to 190, and then say change the patient name to Mark, right? See, that's like inconvenient, right? That's why creating as many constructors that you feel like you can, right, is important. So just don't use a default constructor. Make constructors that you feel like would be beneficial when you're when you're creating the objects. So if we have these constructors right here, like this one right here, instead of doing this, right, we could just say hospital Mark equals new hospital, and we could just say 190 and Mark, right? Or was it? Okay, so it takes in string patient name first and then the int patient ID. So the order was messed up, so it's string first and then 190. There you go. See, we just created we just save like 2-3 lines of code. So yeah, making your constructors is very important. Anyone have questions about this? All right, so we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back like in 8:15. All right, I'll see you guys then. If anyone's still staying here and would like to ask questions, let me know. Since it's during break time. If you guys want me to look at your like code or whatever, or help or fix anything, let me know. Yep, that works too, Zaman Adnan. That's perfect as well. A string has its own class, and inside that class, uh, there's like methods that take in like an array of characters, and that turns into a string. Yeah, basically non-primitive is basically reference. So, what category does integer fall into? Basically, reference variables. Uh, they they have a pointer to a memory. Like their variables is not like set in stone. It points you to a memory address basically. So an array, a string, an object. When you create an object, right? Um, it won't have the values like an integer would have. Like if you say integer x equals 10, right? The value is just 10, right? But if you were to create an object like let's say hospital John, right? And that John will take you to a location, like a memory, and it'll take you to a memory that contains all the information about that object. That's why it's a reference type. So basically, reference types are basically variables that contain like that take you to an address in memory or something. You'll learn it more. You learn more about it next week. Okay. So if my class does not have a constructor, and I create an object of that class, what does it call? Like what is called? If my class does not have a constructor and I create an object of that class, what is called? Correct. It calls the default constructor. Okay. You can have more than one constructor in your class. Yes or no? Yep. You can have multiple constructors in your class. Okay. So that was the trivia for today. Let's continue. So let's look at back to our PowerPoint. Once again, the PowerPoint I uploaded to the mentoring folder, right? It's right here. And, it shows you like basically everything that I'm teaching today. Okay, so what we talked about so far is the structure of a Java project, right? So we all know how to create a Java project, right? We all know what a package is, right? And we all know the structure of a class today, right? We just went over the structure of a class, right? So a class it contains variables, constructors, methods, right? And also you need to inside your Java project, you also need to have a main method, right? So for in this example, class A contains the main method. But you see how these both classes belong under this package. But this class contains the main method, whatnot. So then we're going inside the class, right? We talked about the structure of a class, right? And then which consists of variables, constructors, and methods. And then we talked about those structures. We talked about the structures of methods. We talked about the structures of constructors. We also talked about the structures of methods. So once again, right here, this is the structure of a Java class, right? This is, you're gonna have the access specifier. It's usually public, right? Followed by class, but then by the name of your class, right? And then you're gonna have the variables declared on the top, followed by constructors, and then you're gonna declare and implement methods, right? So here's an example, right? This is a public class employee, right? I have the string name and integer age declared on the top, followed by my default constructor, right? And followed by a constructor that takes in a string and an integer parameter. And then I just have a get name method, right? Which returns the name. Here we talk about what are variables in Java. There are two types of variables, right? Primitive and reference. You could click on these links and learn more about these. They go in depth, and it's from the actual Oracle website. Examples of primitive variables right here. For example, int year equals to 2017. That's a primitive variable. All these are examples of primitive variables. And right here are examples of reference variables. So you see when we create it like here, you guys are familiar with this now, right? How to create an object. That's a reference variable basically. So when we're declaring variables, right? Remember, this is declaring, right? Declaring basically means you're just like, you just I can't think of another synonym, but basically declaring, right? So you just declare a number, right? Number, an integer, right? That has the variable name of number, right? So a number, that's the integer. Here's a name, that's a string, right? Is a boolean absent is like, you just declared it, right? You just declared an income called double, right? But what if you want to you know give you want to give values to those variables, right? So that's called initializing variables. Initializing variable means that you give a value to those variables. So you could say int number equals 30, string name equals John Doe, boolean is absent equals true, and right here you could double income equals 89,000.85, right? So that's what initializing variables is. Then we talked about the structure of a Java method, like so this is the structure of a Java method, right? So it has the access specifier followed by the method type of your method or the return type, right? It's usually the method type is the same as the return type as well, right? And then the method name, that's the name of your method, and then the parameter, whatever's inside the parameter that you're gonna use for your method. And here inside is called the method body. That's how you define your method, what your method should be. So here I have a note, the return types, right? Basically that goes inside this purple block are either primitive types or reference types, right? So you can have like an integer, double, string, right? Array. And then there's a non-return type, which is void, right? That basically, it's the name speaks for itself. It doesn't return anything. So here are two examples of two methods, right? The first method, um, this is the access specifier, it's public, right? This is the return type, it's the integer, so return an integer. And this is the method name, it's add, right? Also, you want to make sure your method name is appropriate. Like if I were to like, if I'm adding something, right, I want to name it add. I don't want to name it like uh you know like I don't want to say car, right? Make it like appropriate. So this is add, right? So here's the parameters. It takes in two parameters, right? Integer A, integer B. On side I have my method body. um I have an integer called result, right? So I declare an integer result. This is basically declaring like this right here, right? Is basically initializing variable. So I'm saying this, have a integer called result, right? And it's gonna be a plus b. So whatever's in this parameter, that's what result will be. And then I want to return that result, right? So this method will return the answer of a plus b. And since this is an integer, it's gonna return an integer result, right? Here, this is a common, like this is a void method, right? It returns nothing. I'm just printing something out to the console. System.out.print is not the same as returning something. This this basically just prints a message to the console and it just says hello. That's it. Okay. And now here's the structure of a constructor, right? The constructor, it has the access specifier. It's usually public, right? Followed by the name of the class. So if your class, right, if your class is hospital, you're gonna say hospital, right? If your class is cars, you're gonna say cars. It's gonna have to be spelled the exact same way as well. You know, however you spell your class, that's gonna be the exact name of the class, or else you're gonna get an error. It's not gonna be a constructor, right? And then it's gonna be followed by a parameter. Um, If you're using a default constructor, there's not going to be anything inside the parameter, right? The purpose of a constructor is to initialize the object. A constructor with no parameters is called a default constructor, and you could have multiple constructors in your class. So example right here, right? So I created like for example, let's say from our employee class, right? Uh, this is the default constructor, right? Public employee. There are no parameters inside, and that's it. I open and close the body. That's a default constructor there, right? It's also up to you what you want to define your default constructor as, right? I could go inside this method and just like say employee name equals John Doe, right? And then the age equals like a 20. That's those are the default values. But you could also leave it blank, right? Here's another constructor, but this takes in a string parameter followed by an integer. So it takes in the name and age, and so whatever name and age you pass into the parameter, it'll assign that value to your variable. So that's what a structure of a constructor is. And here, basically, how to create an object, right? So once you're done with your classes, right? Once you have your classes defined, right? Um, now you want to create that object of a class, right? So let's say you have an employee class already defined, right? You have the variables uh, declared already. You have the constructors created already. You have the methods created already, right? You already have your employee class. Now you go to the main method and you want to create an object, right? So this is how you would create an object. You would say employee1, right? That's the name of your object. You could give it any name you want, but try to be like appropriate and consistent. Then you say equals new, right? And then you're gonna say employee, right? And basically the constructor, what constructor you're using, right? So right here, the declaration, right? The code set in red and green are all variable declarations that associate a variable name with an object type, right? So the red and green right here, right? Uh, this is the variable name, right? Variable name is employee1, and the object type is employee, right? If like, oh, you're wondering, oh, why is an employee an object type? Remember, Java is all about class and objects, right? In order to create an object, you need a class, right? So just think about this as like if you want to like declare an integer, right? Integer x would be your variable name, and integer would be the type, right? The type. But here we're creating objects. So the variable name would be employee1, but the type would be would be the class name, right? Because that's what inside that class you defined what the object can do, right? So that's why we say employee. So employee1, and instantiation, right? Basically the new keyword, right? That's the Java keyword. Is the Java operator that creates the object. So when you write new, it will basically create a new object into your heap memory, right? And this will say, all right, I'm creating a new an object, right? And then you're gonna need to follow it by the constructor, right? So initialization, the new operator, right? Is followed by a call to a constructor, which initializes the new object. So once again, it depends what kind of constructors you have in your class, right? What constructor you constructed. But if you have no constructor, then you could use the default constructor, because there's a reason why it's called the default constructor. It's always there, right? But you can see here that the first line it uses the default constructor, right? And the second line it takes in the constructor that takes in two parameters, which is the name and the age. So with that initializes the object. So now you have two objects, right? You have employee 1 and employee 2. Employee 2, that object has the value, the name as Kenny and the age as 23, right? And employee 1, that has the value of whatever you assigned in the default value, right? I mean default constructor. So whatever is in the default constructor, that's what it consists of. If you have nothing, it's just going to be an object, and then it's up to you to set those names later. Is that clear for everyone? We'll do another quick project in Eclipse. Okay, so let's create a new Java project. If you guys have Eclipse, do this with me as well. It's going to be another simple project, so Java project, right? But instead of this, we'll call this, okay, so far we did cars, we did hospital. Anyone have ideas what kind of object they would like to create? Just thinking of ideas, that's the hard part. What kind of class? All right. Since we're we're all trying to become like automation engineers and stuff, so we basically took this course to make like insane amount of money. So we're gonna call this class your dream job, right? I mean, we're gonna call the project dream job. So it's basically he's gonna we're all gonna talk about our dream jobs and whatever, right? So I created a Java project called Dream Job. Inside my source folder, I'm going to create a new package. I'm going to call it main. And inside that main class, I'm going to have two classes. Inside the main package, I'm going to have two classes. One is going to be application. And remember, your Java class, has to be capitalized, the first letter. And my application is gonna consist of the main method. So I'm gonna check this. If you forgot to uncheck it, what you can basically do is just type in MA and then you just press Control Space, right? And then you'll see the main method, which is right here. You go to that, hit enter, and it will automatically generate the main method for you. So we have our application class, right? And now we want to create our job class, right? Our dream job. So I'm just gonna create a class called job, right? Actually, let's call it dream job. All right. It doesn't matter what you call it. Job, dream job, or dream, it doesn't matter. Okay, so now I have two classes under my main package, right? Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do an exercise with all of us, right? So if you guys were like to ask your peers like what their dream job is, what kind of information would you need to know? Like if you were to survey like friends of yours, what would you ask them? Like what variables would you need to declare? So salary is one important thing, right? Location, right? Name, right? Hours, all those stuff. So we could think of many different kinds of variables, right? So let's declare some variables right now. Let's declare a name, right? So if you want to declare a name variable, what kind of type would that be? We're gonna use string, right? All right, so we're gonna use string name, right? What other variable can we use for string? Position, right? What else? You could use company, right? Where you want to work, right? Location, right? We could use location. All right, we could add many stuff, right? We're just gonna keep this project simple, right? We don't want to add too much information, right? All right, so we declared 4 strings, right? Name, position, company, location, and let's declare salary, right? You know, why do you want your dream job? Is because you want money, right? So if we want to describe salary, well, what kind of data type would you guys feel like would be ideal to use? Yeah, we could use integer, but it's best if we use double, right? You know, there's people that get like salary of like $85,000 and like 75 cents. You know, that 75 cents counts. You know, money's money, so we're gonna use double. So we're gonna say salary, right? What else can we use? So a dream job, right? We have that person's name, we have the position they want to work as, we have the company, the location, and salary. Yeah, that would be ideal, right? That's good enough. Okay, so if you guys go to my PowerPoint, right? Let's look at the structure of a Java class. So far we have the class name called already, and we already declared our variables, right? What's next? We need to create constructors, right? In order to create constructors, this is how you create a constructor, right? Remember, the purpose of a constructor is to initialize the object. So how would we create our default constructor here? How would you guys write it down? Use this thing right here. How would I write it? So our default constructor for our class dream job would the access specifier, right? Which is this. This is public, right? The name of the class. So what's our name of our class? Our name of our class is dream job, right? So we're gonna say dream job, right? Remember, uh, it's case sensitive. And then we use the parameter, but the parameters is we're not going to include anything inside the parameter since this is our default constructor. So we're just going to do this. And then you want to open the body and close it, right? So there you go. Some people leave it like this. Some people put a space after it like that. It doesn't matter how you do it, but I just like having it like this. Okay, so we created our default constructor, right? Um, let's create a constructor that takes in your name. Let's take that takes in your name and company and salary. That's it. So your name, company, and salary. How would you write a constructor for that? So a constructor that takes in string and name, company, and salary. So how would you guys write that constructor? Anyone? Here's a structure of a constructor. This is how you write a constructor. So if we were to look at this, right? How would we create a constructor for this class that takes in the string name, company, and the double salary? So how would we write the constructor? Anyone? Okay, so this is how we would do it. So we're trying to create a constructor that takes in name, right? Company and salary, right? So that's 3 parameters, right? 2 of them happen to be string and 1 of them has to be double, right? So what we do is first we'd look for the specifier that's going to be public, right? And then it's going to be the name of the class. The name of the class is called dream job, right? So we're going to type in dream job. And now we have to deal with the parameters, right? But we said that it's going to involve with name, company, and salary, right? So what we're going to do inside the parameter is first parameter is going to be name, followed by the comma, right? And then the second parameter is going to be company, right? String company. And then finally, the last parameter is going to be the salary, right? So you're going to say double salary. Then you're going to open your constructor and close it, right? And now you have to fill out the body. So let's go back to our default constructor and let's define our default constructor. So let's define a default dream job, right? So would you guys include the name in the default constructor? Yes or no? Would you guys find it ideal to include it? Good. So the answer is no. It's not ideal to include the name inside the default constructor, right? Because when you're creating a dream job object, right? Like let's say I'm creating like if I were to create an object for like my name Fahim, right? But I defined it right here for the name to be John, right? So basically my object is going to contain the name value of John. So it's not going to be ideal. So you want to leave the name alone. So, but what about position? Is position ideal? Position is ideal, we could say like, a lot of people want to become CEO of the company or something, right? So let's just say position, right, equals CEO, right? Something like that. That's like a dream position, right? Can you put is company ideal for a default constructor?
Isn't it July? Yeah, I know. July is going to be very hot and humid. It must be made it so hot.
Remember, we're just creating a default constructor. So for when creating an object, we're just gonna give it a default, assignment. So we could use company, right? So what's like a dream job, like a default dream job? If you're like, if you guys know what I'm saying, like what's the most basic dream job you can think of? Yeah, people would say Google, right? That's like a basic dream job, right, in a company. Okay, so now the salary, right? Like, what's the basic salary people would want? Uh, 500,000. Oh my God, for Google. All right, I'm just gonna make it realistic, right? Like 200,000 or something. Um, keep in mind that we can't use comma for things, so be careful, right? So that's 50, so that's 200,000 plus I'm gonna add like 20 cents, 25 cents, right? There you go. So there you go. We just created. Yeah, you're right. Since it's the CEO, they're gonna get a lot. So I'm just gonna put it at 950, right? Almost. Nah, that's extreme. I'm just gonna say 455,000, right? That seems ideal. Okay. So yeah, we just created a. Actually, we would have to include location as well, right? So location. We're at California, right? I don't know where Google's at. Is it Cali? Silicon Valley. Oh yeah, there you go. I remember I started watching the first episode of Silicon Valley. I stopped. I gotta continue. All right, so there you go. So we have 4 variables assigned in the default constructor, right? So this is basically a default job. When you created a dream job object using the default constructor, these are what the values are going to be, right? So now let's go back to our next constructor, right? That takes in 3 parameters. So how would you fill out the method body here? So if you were to say name equals name, will that work? Company equals company, will that work? Oh my god, you guys are making me blush, man. All right, so what is the error right here? So it's basically saying that this assignment to variable name has no effect, right? So you may remember you want Eclipse to know like which name you're talking about, because there's 2 names here. One name is the parameter, which is right here, which is part of the constructor. Another name is the variable that's declared in your class. So the variable that is declared in your class, you use this. So it's going to say that name would equal to whatever value is assigned here. So you do that for this as well. Okay. So we just created a constructor that takes in 3 parameters. What about a constructor that takes in all parameters? Do you guys want to write that out? There's like 5 variables. You know, you have to make like 5 parameters. There's a shortcut way of doing it, right? What's the shortcut way of doing it? You just select these 2 lines, right? The variables. Right click. You go to source, right? And then on the right, you'll see generate constructor using fields. So I could have done this way, right? I could have used this method and created this constructor, right? I could have just selected name, company, and salary, right? I could have just done it like this and then created, right? But it's just 3 parameters. It's not that long to create. But if your constructor like has like 10 parameters, right? You would want to use this shortcut, right? You don't want to write everything down, and you don't want to get errors. So you would select all, right? And then the insertion point that's basically saying where you want to insert your constructor after, right? So we're gonna click on this. So we want to insert it after this constructor. This constructor takes in 2 strings and a double, right? As you can see here, string name, string company, and double salary, right? So we want that constructor to appear after this. So it's going to be appear at the bottom of this constructor. So we're going to say after dream job string double. We're going to make sure the access modifier is public, and then we're going to press OK. And there you go. It created the constructor for us. You could delete the super if you want. Once again, you'll learn about super later on. So yeah, we just defined our default constructor and we created 2 extra constructors, right? Now let's just leave it like that. And now we're gonna create our getters and setters, right? So this is the same way as creating your constructors, right? Simply just right click, source, generate getters and setters, right? And you want to generate getters and setters for all these variables. So you would say select all, right? And where's the insertion point? Where do you want to insert it after? You want to insert it after your constructors, right? So look here.
It makes me very sad.
The structure of a Java class, right? The variables are at the top, then it's followed by the constructors, and then you declare and implement methods. So what we've done so far is we declared our variables and we created our constructors, right? So now we're making our getters and setters, right? That's basically this part right here. So we're gonna make sure it's after the final constructor that takes in all those parameters, and we're gonna press OK.
It's still hot, but not that hot.
So now if you scroll down, you're gonna see these getters and setters methods, right? And the purpose of these getters and setter methods is that when you create an object, right? When you create an object, you get access to that class's methods and variables, right? So if you create an object, like let's say I create the object of dream job, and let's say I call it Fahim, and if I write Fahim dot, I get access to these methods right here. So if I want to change my name, let's say I legally change my name to like Mohammed, right? So I'd say Fahim dot set name to Mohammed. Do you guys understand? Like that's just an example or something. So these are basically methods right here. You could add methods of your own, like your own methods, right? So let's say I want to create a method that's called like a salary raise, right? So if I were to create a method called salary raise, it basically raises your salary by 10%, right? So how would I do that? So let's look at our PowerPoint presentation and let's look at the structure of a Java method, right? So it's gonna access specifier, the method type, method name, a parameter followed by the method body. So let's just create a method that raises the salary. So we're gonna create the method under our getter and setters. So what's the first thing we're gonna write down? What's the first word we're gonna write down? From right here. We're creating a Java. We're creating our own Java method that'll raise our salary by 10%. So yeah, the first we're gonna it's access specifier, right? So we're gonna do public. And what about the method and return type? We're dealing with a method that raises your salary, right? And what was our salary declared as? What type? It was declared as a double, right? So you would want to use double in this method. So you can say public double, right? Now you want to give it a name, method name. What's a fitting method name? Raise salary, right? Something like this, right? That's a appropriate name, right? And now we're gonna have to take in the parameters. So what do we need to put in this inside the parameter for us to create the method? What parameter do we need? Like what information do we need in order to raise our salary? We need to know the salary of that person, right? So that parameter is gonna take double salary. All right. So there you go. We just defined our raise salary method, right? But now we have to create the method body, right? Okay. So what I would do is so let's create a double variable, right? And let's say it's let's call it the new salary, right? Because that's gonna be whatever the new salary is, right? So now we could say new salary equals, and let's say we're getting 10% more, right? So how are we gonna do this? We're gonna say salary, right? Salary is this thing right here. We're gonna say salary plus, right? And then we're gonna add another parentheses right here, and we're gonna do salary times. Am I doing this right? Right? So this basically increases your salary by 10%. Do you guys understand why? Do you guys see the logistic behind this? Right? So I basically declared a new variable called new salary, right? And then I initialized that variable to be salary plus whatever 10% of that salary is, right? So it's going to be salary plus whatever 10% of that set salary is, right? I'm just going to make it 15. You know? Okay. So we're forgetting one important step, right? So let's look at here, right? Our method type was double, right? So we need to return it, right? So we're missing a return statement. So what are we going to return here? What are we returning right here? Anyone? So let's look at this example right here. So this is public int, right? Addition, right? It takes in 2 parameters, and the result, right? We say int result equals a and b, and then we return the result. So what we're doing here, what are we returning? We're returning the new salary, right? There you go. We just created our own method, which is called raise salary, right? So once again, this is the access specifier, right? The method type return type is double, because we're dealing with double and we're going to return a double. Our method name is called raise salary, because our method is literally raising the salary by 15%, right? And we could the parameter, right? It takes in a salary, right? The variable, right? So right here we say double new salary, right? We declare it, and then we initialize that variable to equal salary times 50% of the salary, and then we return the new salary, right? Let's create one more method, but this method takes in 2 parameters.
Be happy.
So we're gonna say double salary and double percentage, right?
Be happy.
Okay, so you can see here that we have
Be happy.
2 methods that have the same name, right? But we're able to do that is because this one takes in 2 parameters, right? It's the same thing like as constructors. It could be the same name, but as long as the parameters are different, you could do it, right? Okay, so in this method, the default salary raise is by 15%, right? But in this method, we give that percentage, right? We could say 40%, right? They just type in .40, or like 50% or 25%. Do you guys understand why I added that as a parameter?
Be happy. Be happy.
Any doubts? So this coding is going to be similar to this method right here. So what we're going to say is double new salary, right? And now we're going to say new salary equals, then we say salary plus salary times, and then we're going to say percentage, right? Because that's whatever percentage they put here, and then we're going to return new salary. There you go. Do you guys understand the difference between these 2 methods? One method, it raises your salary by 15%, right? And another method, right? This was where you put whatever percentage, however however times you want to raise your salary by. So that percentage, if they were to put like if they were to put 30%, right? So times the salary by 30%, right? Remember, these two methods are the same spelling, but the parameters, this takes in an extra parameter, so that's why you can do it. And quick advice is that you see the method, right, inside this body.
It's a very bad thing.
We call it a scope. So inside the scope of this body, it doesn't matter if you keep on like repeating the, like I call double new salary right here and double new salary right here. It's different for both of these methods. This one, it only worries about this method right here. So whatever is inside this body right here, that's what it's gonna deal with. Any doubts or questions? So we just created a dream job class, right? And we just created our two methods, right? Now we go back to the application, right? Okay, so now we want to create an object. So let's go right here, creating an object. So who wants to be a volunteer? Who wants to like give information of their first dream job? Anyone? I'll just start off with me, right? So if I want to create an object, right? So I would have to follow this format: the declaration, instantiation, and initialization, right? So our class is called Dream Job. So what we're gonna say is Dream Job, right? And then I'm gonna name the variable, and I'm gonna name it my name, right? So Fahim's Dream Job, right? So DJ stands for Dream Job, right? And then I'm gonna say new, and then I'm going to take in the default constructor, right? So I'm gonna say Dream Job, and I'm gonna take the default constructor. So I'm basically CEO of Google working in Silicon Valley, and that's my salary, right? Because this is the this is what we defined in our default constructor, right? Who else? Let's get in like 2 or 3 more. So someone created an object using this constructor, and someone else with this constructor. So 2 more objects. So someone create 2 more objects with these 2 constructors.
That's the old I miss the old times. Don't worry, be happy.
So is anyone creating an object using these 2 constructors? Just follow this guide right here if you're getting stuck. This PowerPoint is in the mentoring folder, so you guys can open it yourself as well. Okay, has anyone tried in the chat? Okay, so I'm just gonna create two new objects. I'm just gonna take random people from the chat and use their name. So I'm gonna create a object for Zaman stream job, and I'm gonna use the second constructor, right? The second constructor, it takes in a name, company, and salary, right? So the name is Zaman, and then it takes in the company and the salary, right? So I don't know what Zaman's dream job is. So I'm just gonna give it like a random. I'm just gonna say Amazon. And for salary, I'm gonna say like 150,000, 50 cents, right? And it's a double, so no quotations. And there you go. So I created an object called Zaman DJ, right? DJ stands for dream job, and it has these values assigned, right? And now let's use the final constructor that takes in all the parameters. I'm gonna take someone else's name from the chat. I'm gonna use Mohammed, right? I'm just gonna say Mo's DJ, right? And I'm gonna say new dream job. And since this one takes in all parameters, so it's gonna take a string name, position, company, location, and salary, right? So name, position, company, salary. Name, position, company. So name is gonna be Mohammed. Company is gonna be, let's say, let's give you, let's just say T-Mobile, right? And then we say, oh no, positions as the second one. So I'm gonna give you president, right? You're the president of T-Mobile. Right? So we gave you the name, position, company, and then we're gonna say the location is salary. Location, I'm gonna say NYC. The salary, I'm gonna say since you're the president, you know.
Be happy.
Right? Okay. So you guys understood how I created these objects?
Be happy.
Is anyone still there? All right. Do you guys understand how I created these objects? Because if not, I can just show it again. Let's see. All right. So we created these three objects, right? And now, let's say I created an object using the default constructor, but I want to set the name, right? Because why did you not start with the access public? For what? For creating an object. If we're creating an object, you start. This is the format. So you have the code set in red and green are all variable declarations that associate a variable name with an object type.
Don't worry.
So the red is basically what your object type is, right? So our object type, it depends on the class, right? So our class is called dream job. So our object type is going to be dream job, right? And then the green is the variable name. So that's what we're going to name our object. So I named it Fahim's dream job. And then the new, that's basically a keyword operator that creates the object. And then it follows by the constructor, right? What constructor you're using. So I use the default constructor. So dream job Fahim's DJ equals new dream job, right? So if you look into our class, right? our default constructor, this is what we assigned the values, right? But we didn't assign it, we didn't give it a name, right? Because it will be inconvenient. So right now I'm gonna set the name. So what I'm gonna do is Fahim's DJ, right? And I press dot, and I'll be able to set name. So I just type in set, and it'll show all the set functions. And I go to set name. I'm just gonna name it to Fahim, right? There you go. When it underlines yellow, right? It means that it's not being used. But you saw here, like right here, right now, my thing is underlined yellow because my object is not being used, right? But if I created the statement right here, in which I use the object and I set the name, you see it's gone. The yellow underline is gone. Okay, so now let's for Simon's DJ, right? That's the constructor that takes in the name, company, and salary, and let's give him a position, right? So we're gonna say Simon DJ dot set position, right? We're gonna give him the vice president. So we're gonna say vice president, right? And we don't gotta set anything new for most DJ because it already took all the parameters. But let's just say, he moved from NYC to like Florida, right? So set the location. So there you go. All right. Okay, so before we get to, so when we execute the line, right? When we execute this inside our main method, right? When it's in line 11, when it's in this line, what will Mohammed's location be? Most DJ, this is the object. What will the location be? Exactly, it will be NYC, right? But as the program executes to the next line, and then goes to the next line until it gets to line 17, right? That's where it's gonna change it to NYC, right? So if I were to say like, what's gonna be in this line, what's gonna be most DJ's location set to? Yeah, it's gonna be Florida. So remember, when you're executing a program, right, it executes line by line. So remember, order matters. So let's look at it right here. So let's print out to the console. So I'm gonna use our shortcut, right? And we're gonna print out where Mohammed works, right? So we're gonna say what we're gonna say is most DJ, right? We're gonna get the name, right, of the object, right? And we're gonna say we're gonna concatenate with the string, and we're gonna say works at, and we're gonna concatenate it again, and we're gonna say at we're gonna get the location now, right?
If you listen to that song, it's gonna make you happy more,
Okay. So what should this print out right here?
That's what the song say. When you face that problem, or when you face the trouble you got, you're gonna get too much upset, Right?
What should the system print out?
And then the song said, don't worry, be happy. You always should be happy all the time. That's the sunset.
So it's gonna get most.dj's get name, right? So it's gonna be Mohammed, right? So it's gonna say Mohammed, and then it's gonna say works at, right? Because that's the string. And then we're gonna get the location, right? So it's gonna most DJ get location, and it's gonna say NYC. So now let's run it, and let's see what it prints out to the console. So you see here, it says Mohammed works at NYC, right? Now let's take the same exact line, right? And we print it after this line right here, right? So what will it say here in this line? Florida, right? So let's try it. So you see here, the first one, Mohammed works at NYC. That's the first system.out print, which is right here. And then the second one, it says Mohammed works at Florida, which is the second system.out, right? So a program, when it executes, it reads it line by line. Okay, so let's do another execution. So let me just comment this out. If you don't want a program to execute, a line to execute, you can simply just type in // 2 times, and that comments the line out, right? So right now, if I were to run it again, it's only gonna print this out. So it's gonna say, it's just gonna show this one right here, because this line got commented out. But I can simply just remove that, and it'll be back. But let's write let's write another system.out print statement. Let's say get name, right? We're gonna say currently the, and then we're gonna add another concatenation, and then we're gonna say the position, right? So we're gonna say Fahim's DJ dot get position, and then we're gonna concatenate it again, right? And we're gonna say, so it's saying Fahim is currently the, and it's gonna get my position, which is gonna say CEO. Then I'm gonna say of, right? Then I'm gonna concatenate it again. Then I'm gonna get the company, right? And then I'm gonna say, I'm gonna concatenate it with a string and say, and has a salary of, and then I'm gonna concatenate it again, and I'm gonna get the salary right here. All right. So let's print that out. Let's see it. Fahim is currently the CEO of Google and has a salary of $455,025, right? You guys see that? How I did that? Okay, so now let's say Zaman is like jealous of me and Mohammed's salary, right? And he wants a raise, right? So you know how we created two methods that raises salary? So let's use it here. So Zaman, right? DJ. So he's currently has 150,000, while me and Mohammed, we have like above 450,000. So he wants like at least like 200% raise, right? So let's just do that, right? So we're gonna look for the, what was our method name again? It was called raise salary, right? So yeah, we're gonna raise salary, but we want to raise it by 200%. So we're gonna use this method. We're not gonna use this method because that only raises it by 15%, right? So we're gonna say zaman.dj, and we're gonna type in raise. And right here you see two different things, right? These are the same names, but one, it takes in a double salary parameter, just one parameter, and the other one takes in a double salary and a double percentage, right? And we want to raise it by 200%, so we're gonna use this one, right? Enter. So what's Zaman's current salary? We could hard code it, or we could simply just say Zaman DJ dot get salary, right? That passes into as one parameter, right? And then for percentage, we say 200%, right? And now let's print this out. First, let me uncomment these. All right. So, oops. Oh, I forgot this one too. Okay. So now let's print this out. So we're gonna say Zaman DJ.getName, concatenated has a salary of, right? And then we're gonna say Zaman DJ dot get salary. Actually, I don't think this will work because this method. Hold on, I'm gonna try it out. Okay, yeah. So this one it doesn't work because the method right here we're just uh changing we're raising the salary of a number, right? We're not changing the salary of the object. If that makes sense. So this one won't make any sense right here for right now. So you guys don't have to worry about this, but let's just print this out right here. So let's run it. Okay, so that's a lot, right? We get 3.0 times 10 to the 7, right? So 200 is too much. Let's just say 90% raise, right? See, so he went from 150,000 to 285,000. Any questions? So today we understood the structure of a Java project, and then we went in depth of like the structure of a Java class, and then inside the class we looked over the structure of variables, constructors, and methods, right? So yeah, just keep practicing. Use this PowerPoint as a guide. I showed you guys like, just create simple classes, stuff that you can think of, right? Just think of like, create another class called a class called like, school, right? That takes as the variables like a student and their grades and whatever. Just create simple classes. The more you guys practice on hand, the better you'll get. All right, so that's it for today. The PowerPoint is in the mentoring folder. Any questions, anyone? Anyone have concerns or need help? Let me know right now. If anyone needs help anyone needs help in their code, let me know right now. I could look over it, give you feedback, suggestions. By the way, if you want to change, let's say Zaman's salary, so it was supposed to be like this. So we're gonna do Zaman.dj, right? We're gonna do set salary, and then inside that we would have to call in the method, right? I think I'm doing it right. So, and then we're gonna say we're gonna get his salary, and then we're gonna say the percentage. So we're gonna say 80%. So yeah, this doesn't work. Just ignore whatever I just did right now. Okay. How do you differentiate creating an object from declaring your variables? Okay. So basically, right here, when I when I'm creating an object, when you create an object, you're basically declaring and initializing it and instantiating it. So when you create an object, right, you're basically doing this. Uh, hold on. When you're creating an object, you're basically doing all these steps, right? But declaration is just one out of the three steps for creating an object. So when you're declaring an object, you're basically saying like, oh, you want to declare a dream job object, right? So you're gonna say dream job, and then you're gonna you're gonna give it a name. So I'm gonna say Fahim, and that's it. That's you basically just declared an object like this. But now you want to initialize it and instantiate it, right? So you just say equals and new, and then dream job like that. So that's the difference between declaring an object and creating an object. Mohammed Mehdi, this counts as I think this counts as group. I think this counts as both. I'm not sure. I think group discussion is the hours after class in Saturday, Sunday. So like Mr. Mafi usually finishes around 3:30, and then like there's a student in the class who would like lead the group discussion. It'll end till like 5 or 5:30 or 6 or whatever. And I think that counts as group discussion, and then mentoring is obviously this. All right, anyone else have any questions? So we have tomorrow and Friday. We're just gonna repeat the same stuff. If you guys feel confident enough, or if you guys are still struggling, join tomorrow. If you feel confident enough to do this, you guys can like relax and whatever. We're gonna keep going over the same thing. Repetition will help you guys. Also, it'll also help if you guys are doing this along with me, just not watching. All right, that's it for today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Night.